Sunday morning, Moramite here. Good morning. Jump. You have to be careful where you jump today because you may not see the landing area. It is a bit patchy and misty, so just be careful where you are. Just en route this morning, it was actually misty and foggy at Derby, whichever way you want to do it. Probably mist, isn't it, that was there. So it's very rare. We had a whole day yesterday of nothing, just pure sunshine for the bicycle youth tour yesterday.
We had a whole day of nothing yesterday. You could see nothing.
Really?
It was pea super, but this morning at Lamode it was lovely and sunny. So, you could actually see the sky anyway. So it wasn't so bad.
Something.
But yeah, we were saying about the words in Manx for this sort of low, misty, low clouds, overcast sort of weather, and it's fantastic. The number, the variety of vocabulary we have to describe this kind of weather. Grosh, gromacht, gruid, muir genus. Those are just some of the words that you can use for it, and it just means that kind of misty, horrible, dark, sort of cloudy weather.
I wonder if they used any of them words in the old fairy tales and stories. I suppose it would fit well with them, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And I'm fairly sure gromacht is that not a word that they use in Scotland as well? In kind of Scottish English speech, I'm sure there's a word a bit like that. I'm trying to rack my brains.
Well, it might come. You got 2 hours to think.
Yes,
of it,
you
so
never
don't
know.
worry about it too much. Anyway, we brought a special guest with you today, Phil.
Yes, Annie is in. Annie said to me just earlier, yes, the only reason I'm here is because you ran out of people to ask. But no, that's not true.
It was planned. He did ask.
It was.
He did say weeks ago, must get Annie on the programme.
Yeah.
If you say so.
Yes, would I tell a lie? Look at this face.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So, what the special occasion was, we were looking on, I think it was either Facebook or Twitter, and Culture Vannon had this thing up about Eaglach Fannin, which is Eaglach means the youth, and so Eaglach Fannin, the youth of man, which was a youth group created by by Moana Douglas. Sorry, I'm losing it completely here.
But the young people in Munjavega is correct.
Well, yes, it is sort of. But Eaglach Fannin it was Moana Douglas's creation, and as a result of Eaglach Fannin, Annie has become the prolific writer and composer and arranger of music and poems. So and award-winning writer of poems too. So I thought it'd be good, particularly because Culture Vannon are asking people about Eaglach Fannin at the moment to get Annie on, and hopefully she'll prompt a few memories as well and get a few people to contact Culture Vannon.
2 minutes past 10 o'clock. Moramai, good morning. It's Moghrey Jedoonee, and our guest this morning, Phil Gawne, and Annie Kissack as well. And it's a bit of a, I'll choose these words, family affair this morning. We've got Phil and Annie and Ewan downstairs reading the news.
Yes,
so,
the only thing we're missing is the horses, the cat, and Kitty, our daughter, who's hopefully listening to the programme as we speak.
Oh, well, we'll get her in 1 week.
Freeze a crowd, so we'll see.
Get away with you. Some would disagree with that, especially on a Saturday night. But, Annie, you heavily involved in many things, I suppose on the music side of things, on the poetry side of things as well, but Caird and Cúideach, I think that's one that springs to mind with me.
Yes, Caird and Cúideach. You did well with the pronunciation there.
Did I?
You did indeed. Caird and his friends, Caird and Cúideach together, friends together. Well, we've been going an awful long time. How long, Phil? 25 years, maybe more.
Anyway, yeah.
And we sing, as you may know, arrangements of Manx traditional songs, and also a lot of more modern songs. Modern in some ways.
Justin Timberlake.
By me. No. Mainly in Manx Gaelic, because that's really why I started the choir many years ago, really to, I suppose, bring to a wider audience the beauty of Manx songs that wouldn't necessarily be known by a lot of people, certainly not the ones in Manx Gaelic at the time. And I didn't intend to start a choir, but I sort of acquired 2 or 3 people I knew to sing things, and gradually people joined, and we decided quite liked what we were doing. It kept going, and we carried on to this day.
Still going
And
today.
Saturday night is choir practice night.
Right. The Cajun Cujik then, is it a mixed choir, this, just for people who don't know?
It is a mixed
Yeah.
choir, very mixed, some might say.
Phil is in it then.
Indeed, yes. Friends, relatives, brothers, sisters. We just sort of co-opted people. We have a few younger people, it's fair to say, but we did start off as a very young choir once upon a time.
But the songs that you said, that there's traditional ones and more modern ones as well, but you do your own stuff as well. That's a passion of yours, isn't it?
Yes. Of course, it's a small island, and no matter how hard you look, there's a limited amount of material available. That's not to say that once upon a time there weren't a lot more traditional songs being sung on the island of Manx. There must have been, I'm sure there was, but in terms of what's actually recorded and noted, and what out of that you can actually sing because there's enough words, or that the tune goes with the words, it's relatively limited. So you have to use all your imagination and a lot of hard work sometimes to put tunes together with words. And after a while you think, well, here I am, I can speak Manx, I can write Manx to a reasonable extent. I like making up tunes. Let's make some things up for ourselves that we enjoy doing. So gradually over the years, the repertoire of the choir has come to include probably about 50% of new material composed over the last 10, 15 years, I suppose.
Right.
And that's the way it's been going.
I know that you probably can play about 5 instruments as well, can you?
No, not really. I've not really had a formal musical training in any way. Playing the piano to a degree, probably better by ear than
you
trying
can
to see the
you
notes.
can press the key to get the starting note.
Oh no,
the key.
I can play what I want to play, put it
Right.
like that. And I'm not too bad on the tin whistle on a good day.
Right, but the Cajun Cujik, though, is it all a cappella?
Yes,
stuff, yeah.
yes.
Or to the uneducated, without any instruments? just
Without
the
any
voice.
instruments, it's far easier. You can sing anywhere then, can't you? You're not looking around for who can play the piano, and is it one that requires a button to start it? And if you do press the button, is it going to go off on some mad rhythm in the middle of it? So, no, you're much better off a cappella for all kinds of reasons, not least the practical.
And how many's in? We just finish off talking
Yeah,
about
sure.
the group there. The
Well,
choir.
we have about, I don't know, what would you say, Phil? 14?
15 maybe.
Comes
15,
and
16,
goes.
yeah.
We try and keep fairly...
Occasional guest
fairly small.
performers come in, don't they?
Oh, they
So,
do,
yeah.
yes, and then they go. But we've had a core of about a dozen to 15 over the last 5 or 10 years, I suppose.
Yeah. And what about competitions? I mean, you do go away to various events, don't you?
We have been
Yeah.
away. We a few years ago now, we went to the Pan Celtic Festival and competed against some choirs there from Ireland and Scotland and Wales, and we did very well actually. We won 2 out of the 3 main awards. But it has to be said, we don't normally go in for competitions, and the real reason we went there was really to hear what other choirs who were singing in a similar way to ourselves, perhaps with their own music, their own composers, singing a cappella in their own language, how they were arranging and performing their songs. So it was really more out of interest rather than desire to compete that we went there. However, it was very nice to come back with a couple of cups, I have to say.
But
Yes.
it must be difficult, I suppose, for adjudicators and judges to sit there and listen to choirs singing in completely different languages and have different arrangements to sort of figure out what's the best. Because I suppose some languages will have 20 syllables and consonants in one word, won't they,
Yes, I suppose so. I certainly Scottish Gaelic would seem to have a lot more sounds in it than Manx. So once upon a time, Manx would have been like that too. But I think generally that the judges at these sort of Celtic things have a general idea of what the different languages sound like. And they'd be listening to the music too. And we do tell them a little bit about things as well, of course.
Tell them the gist of the,
Indeed,
the
yes,
songs.
yes.
Lovely. All right, we're going to talk more, of course, between now and 12 o'clock with our guest this morning on Moghrey Jedoonee. Time for this, though, 25:31, and time to update you on the weather forecast for this morning in English and in Manx. And mist and low cloud will affect much of the island at first today, but gradually this will thin and break to allow sunny spells to develop, at least in some areas. When the sun comes out, it'll be warm as temperatures rise to 16 or 17 Celsius. And tonight, most places will turn misty again, I'm afraid. Then tomorrow, warm, sunny spells. They should gradually develop again as the mist becomes increasingly patchy. The maximum temperature is going to be 17 degrees, and the outlook, a little rain developing for a time on Tuesday with brisk southerly winds, but later in the day it will become dry and bright.
Tírim son an chud smú leis géach an fés. Geall na gríanach de menach an siras túi an elian, ríst, ach grosh, gromach, grúd as mua genus, ons an sia as jas son an chud smú. Temprelis gerig as jeg na jag Celsius as ulvain ruid. Brouwes tírim Jedoonee leis shallan bla gríanach chitrish, ach fós bí an gromach faggot ons bol na gé sa vora elie. Temprelis gerig as jag na jag Celsius vai sul vai slisten mar in a gee. Hig began the lia mora gemert shallan grianach sanasta.
25 to 11. It is Moghrey Jedoonee here on Manx Radio through till 12. Let me tell you, after the 12 midday news today, it's going to be Sunday Opinion. And this week's programme features highlights from an evening of Any Questions with the theme Diversifying the Manx Economy. On the panel to field the questions are owner of Quorum Partners, Charlie Woolner, civil engineer and CEO of Port Evolution and Development, Robin Bromley Martin, founder of Derby Wellness, Courtney Heading, and Deputy Chief Executive of the Department of Enterprise, Carl Hawker. They're all guests on the Any Questions with the theme Diversification, the Manx Economy from 12 midday today with Roger Watterson. Okay, Annie Kissack, let me talk about when you first got involved in writing, singing. Were you a good singer as a child?
Not really. I actually started singing at Sunday school. Apparently I was a loud singer at this point, stomping round St. Peter's Sunday School singing Hear the Pennies Dropping for Jesus. When I was 2, it was noted I had a loud voice. But I'm not really as I've said before, I don't really consider myself a singer. I'll sing, and I'll sing if nobody else does, and I'll encourage other people to sing. I think I am more an encourager and an enabler, really. Not being particularly modest on that. I think that's the truth. But I like singing in groups and arranging things and bands and things. I started with the interest in Manx languages, first of all, really, at Onken School, when I was about 7, I think. And the teacher then, Leslie Quilliam from Peel, who later went on to be the head teacher at St. John's, but at that point he was my class teacher in Onken. He decided to have classes, Manx classes after school, for people who were interested. And in truth, there weren't many people interested, but I was one of them. And I remember running home all excited because suddenly all the place names around us, we lived Brule Drive, and then there was Ballacrint Drive, and suddenly I remember saying to Mum and Dad, well, why don't you know about all this? And they're Manx. And they said, well, I don't know why we don't know. Maybe we should find out. So anyway, cut a long story short, they got involved in the Manx as well as me. As adults, they went to some classes at Lord Street at night, and they met all kinds of people who were active in the Manx, and somebody, I think it was Leslie Quirk, who was a lovely man, he suggested we might like our children, my sister might like to go to Moana Douglas's little youth club, as it was known at the time, right, where we could find out more about Manx songs and do a bit of dancing, and it sounded fine to us. So that's how I sort of got involved more in the the Manx music side of things. It was about 6 or 7.
Right. There wouldn't be many Manx songs getting sung at the Sunday school then, was there?
No, none at all. None at all.
No. And Moana Douglas, we've mentioned, and we're going to be talking about her more in detail throughout the morning. But we've got a track now, a piece of music that you've chosen this morning. And looking out the window here, we're a bit covered in Manannan's cloak, aren't we? And this piece of music then?
Indeed, this track is the first track on one of Skeel's, what do you call them?
Albums?
CDs? Albums, that's the word. The first one called Manannan, which is quite a jolly little thing, I think, and quite appropriate when we start talking about Moana Douglas, but also the first thing I thought about when I looked out of the window this morning.
That is nice and jolly for a Sunday morning, isn't it? That's the first of our Manx tracks this morning from the album called Slipway from Skeel, and that one called Manannan. Yeah, it's just suitable for today. And there's, I suppose, a lot of the Manx songs are quite slow, but then the more modern they've got, have they got faster? Is that fair to say, or am I talking a load of cod?
Well, you can make a song any way you like.
See, you can sing the same song quickly or slowly.
Indeed, very basically. You could, I suppose most songs, if you think of them in different ways, they can not sound like the same song at all. Yeah, so that Manannan song there was very appropriate, not just because Manannan's there with his mist, but as I was mentioning Moana Douglas and her youth group there earlier. Moana Douglas was somebody who I suppose bigged up Manannan, if you like, put him into the popular sphere a bit more than he might have been otherwise. She was very interested in the old traditions of the island, and of course Manannan's there as one of the oldest, the founder of man in the stories. Lot of stories of Sophia Morrison's, which the Manx fairy stories mention Manannan there with his tributes. Moana Douglas learnt an awful lot from Sophia Morrison, and she herself spent a lot of her earlier life wandering around, looking apparently in the country for any other fragments of stories or sightings even of Manannan, and she spent quite a bit of the time as a young teenager really wandering around in the hills, reputedly trying to talk to people. Were there any more legends or stories or traces of any of this really old sort of mythic stuff still around in the 19-teens and the 1920s? So she was always sort of very aware of this. And misty weather, such as we have today, would be very much the sort of weather where you would expect something strange would be taken up on the hills.
But Moana Douglas is a name that's, I think, the more people have been learning Manx here in the Isle of Man and getting to know more about the Manx traditions, it's a name that comes up more and more often, and you had the pleasure of being taught by her.
Yes, it's very difficult to get a grip on her, really. She was a very unusual woman, and I think even from being a small child, I realised we're not going to meet the likes of her ever again in my life, and I might as well listen and learn. She certainly seemed to know a lot of things and be interested in a lot of things that I think I would have been interested in any way as an imaginative child. She would teach a group, well, I suppose she would teach loosely. She wasn't really a born teacher, but she held a weekly youth group, as I said, Saturday evenings in Douglas and Mount Havelock. Eglach Vannon, which you mentioned earlier, the Manx youth, and a group of, say, a motley band of children would be brought there or walk there. Most of them came from Douglas, quite close to Mount Havelock. They would turn up and she would teach us a few songs, a bit of dancing, pass a little bit of folklore knowledge, a little bit of Manx, and the hour would go quite quickly. But I only found out later that she'd actually be doing this sort of club from the early 1930s. I was there in the mid-60s on to the late 1970s when it sort of petered out, I think. So we were sort of at the end of a very long tradition of people going to Moana Douglas to find out about the culture and to get enthused with it. So more recently, Bob Carswell and James Franklin at Culture are trying to find out about other people who attended Eglwch Fanon at different times in its history. I think the idea is that at some point, if possible, those of us who are still around are going to get together and exchange reminiscences and talk about the different things that happened over the years. I think it might make it quite a colourful and interesting snapshot of how culture has been viewed over quite a long period of Manx history, really. So we're looking forward to see if anybody, well, a few people have already got in touch, I believe, but I would like some more people. If there's anybody there who used to be in Eglwch Fanon and would like to talk about their experiences, good, bad and indifferent, I'm sure they would like to hear from you at Culture Fanon.
Oh yes, we'll get them in here as well if need be.
Oh yes.
Okay, we'll talk more about Moana Douglas and all sorts of things to do with Manx music and poetry as well, we haven't touched on yet. 8 minutes before 11 o'clock, and Annie Kissack, you were talking about Moana Douglas, who you had the pleasure of being taught with, and was she a typical Manx woman?
Not at all.
No?
She did her own thing entirely. I don't suppose she would have described herself as a feminist, but I think these days, looking back, I would see her as that. She seemed to be out of her time a bit with her interest, ahead of her time, perhaps.
Yeah, she wasn't going to be ruled by...
No man and no institution.
Was she ever married?
No.
No, well, fair enough then. Good, plenty to talk about. We're going to talk about Mona. We're going to talk about your poetry as well, because you've got an interest in that as well as the singing, Annie, haven't you?
I have,
Yeah,
yes.
so we'll talk about that in the second hour of the programme. We've got our What's On guide to do. We've got more weather forecasts in English and in Manx. We might bring up a few more words for you as well. We got our Sunday smoothie at 11:10, all to come between now and 12. Mist and low cloud will affect much of the island at first today, but gradually this will thin and break away to allow sunny spells to develop, at least in most areas around the island. Where the sun comes out, it will be quite warm as temperatures rise to 16 or 17 with very light winds. Tonight, most places will turn misty again. Then tomorrow, warm sunny spells should gradually develop again as the mist becomes increasingly patchy. Maximum temperature tomorrow, again around 17. The outlook, a little rain developing for a time on Tuesday with brisk southerly winds, but later in the day it will become dry and bright.
Well, Jigan Machas and Unyag to Jean Neville and Fashionus Nehemsha Fifi Kiat a feather be or the Velen and Cage it's Jack as Eshtigol Marcus and Greenon. So Chirmson and Cood Smoolish Geek and Fest Gal na Greenach the Menach on Shia as Tui and Elian Reach och Grosh Gromach Grud as Murginus ons and Sha as Jasson and Cood Smoo. Brau as Chirm Jaloon, Le Shallan Blag Greenach Chit Rish, ach Fosby and Gromacht, Faggot ons Bol na Gas of Ora Elie. Temperalus Girig as Shak Jeg na Hockjeg Celsius, as Sulvai Sliston Mara na Gee. Hig Began na Lia Mora Jamut, Shallan Greenach and Yasta.
9.5 minutes past 11 o'clock. That was called High Horse. No carvels to talk about on this morning's programme, I don't think yet. Annie Kissack is with me and Phil Gawne as well on for the next hour here on Moghrey Jedoonee. It means Sunday morning in Manx, and she's a bit of a mixed morning, and lots of them gromags and all sorts of words Phil on that.
Yes, it's very definitely.
I feel a new song title might be on the way somehow.
Mist, fog,
you could
mist.
do a lot with the Groma, Grush, and what was the other fella?
Grau, Gromach, yeah, and all those.
Oh yes,
all those
yes,
words.
you could definitely have fun with those words.
I was just thinking, actually, maybe for those lucky enough to be seeing the sun, we should also mention that Gyal, as Shal and Greenach are excellent words. Gyal is this word bright, and Shallan is spells, and Greenach would be sunny. So Shal and Greenach is sunny spells. So hopefully we'll see a few of those, as well as the grow and the growmach and the gruid and all that stuff.
The Joe.
Yeah, as long I love words that sound like they mean.
Yes,
there's
it gives you a
certain
feel
words.
for it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yes,
it does.
yeah.
Mona Douglas, Annie, were talking about before the news there about her getting involved in the music and the songs and the poems and dancing. You still dance?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, Mona is mainly known, I suppose, as a collector of songs and dances, and perhaps it was as a collector of dancers. People became aware of her again, if they hadn't been already, in the 1970s, when there was a sort of revival of interest in Manx culture, and quite a number of dance groups got underway, and Mona was still about and quite energetic at that point, and showing people how to do dancing. But indeed, at Eglach Fannin, there were always groups of people involved in different kinds of dances. When I used to go there to this rather abandoned-looking room at the back of Mount Havelock, this was very damp, and there was a bucket underneath the roof where the water
Oh, I was going to say,
in.
I thought, didn't they have toilets?
But, there was I think there was a well, there was a toilet, but it was squished into the corner unceremoniously. But anyway, all around the walls of the room, there were photographs of Manx dancing over the different eras,
Right.
black and white ones, sort of stretching back a long time, and the groups of people dancing, obviously on the villa gardens, probably in the 30s and the 40s. There were pictures of various people dancing the dirk dance, the sword dance, which was quite a coup, I think, for Mona. There were people going to perform this at the Albert Hall at some point.
Really?
So there was a tradition of dancing going on. However, by the time myself and my sister and my friends and people were at Eglach Fannin, I think the standard wouldn't have taken us to the Albert Hall or anywhere else, really.
And just remind people what Eglach Fannin means.
Right, Eglach Fannin is the Manx youth,
Yeah.
and the idea, I suppose, was to teach us some of the traditional culture of the island, sort of thing. We weren't probably going to find out at school unless we were very lucky, really.
Yeah. And as the dance, and I know you said about songs and things that you can make 5 or 6 different versions of the same songs. I mean, do the dances change much, or have they always been set since they originally were designed? Or
I think dances change, and certainly, as far as Mona was concerned, if she had half a dance, she wouldn't scruple to make a full dance out of it, add bits, and that was the same with the music too, I think. So some people would question her authenticity in terms of, the things we're seeing today, or the things we're hearing today, the real McCoy, and they're not, and I don't think they ever would be. And I think most people would accept that culture changes and we move on, we develop our own things, and we use parts of things from the past and add our own bits to it. After all, we're hopefully creative people when it comes to it.
so I suppose you've learned a lot in your lifetime from your time with Moana Douglas, with a sort of dabbling and changing and thinking, oh, let's try this. I'm going to make, and you've sort of, by the sound of it, done the same with music.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, definitely. Otherwise, why do it if you're not going to get a creative buzz from doing anything?
Yeah.
Why do it? I don't see any advantage to things to be set in stone. I think you should try and find out where things come from as much as you can, but there's a lot we don't know about what went on the island in the past, and we probably will never know. So we're left to our imagination and a bit of investigation where we can, and do our best. And it's Manx, it's now, it's as it is, and I think that's a good thing.
It is. We'll talk about poetry very shortly. It's 11:15. And Annie, let's talk about the poetry side of Moana Douglas now. It's a big passion of yours, and Mona was involved in it quite heavily as well.
She was an amazing writer, and she started writing poetry very early when she was in her teens, and indeed published a few small volumes when she was that young. But as it coincided with the time of the First World War, it probably wasn't the best time for her poetry to be put out. So I'd like to read one if I can.
You may go ahead.
Yes. I've picked this because I think it sort of sums up the woman quite well, that the need to be on your own and get in tune with the elements. It's also got a misty bit about it, and a restlessness. So it's called Clyfina. A green, pleasant place is Clyfina in Glen Rushen, green and quiet, even in stormy weather, full of the low and dreamy voice of the river and the far, high sound of the wind over wastes of heather. Stumbling across the hills on a misty evening, I came on it suddenly in a burst of light, green with grass and tree, where the bog and the moorland stretched out lonely and dim towards the night. I thought, I should like to live in this place forever. I could sit on a stone and watch the river run past and be quiet and learn the intimate speech of the elements and forget the restlessness of my heart at last. I will watch the sun and the moon rising and setting and the changing shades of the slopes as the seasons roll, and out to the strength and loneliness of the mountains I will woo peace and contentment to my soul. So I thought, and then, through the quietness round me, remembrance grew of the dreams that grant no rest, and down in that green and quiet glen of the mountains, I heard the wild sea moving out in the west.
Ooh. Shooting that there's weather outside.
Yes,
that one, isn't it?
I think that's out towards Glen May way. We were walking out there the other week, weren't we, Phil? Looking to see what the bluebells were doing, and they certainly doing a lot better than they are down in our part of the world.
Yes.
Not much sunshine for them, I suppose, yet.
Yeah, I think the bluebells have been waiting for a bit of decent weather for us, but be waiting a little while yet.
All right. Okay, let's tell you about a brass band festival in Laxey this afternoon. 3 bands from Laxey, Douglas and Castletown will be playing at 3 public houses in the centre of the village on New Road. They'll be rotating around the 3 venues between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock, followed by a big brass blast-off about 4:15 this afternoon in the village square. So there we go. Great afternoon ahead in Laxey, and that's the brass bands all getting underway in various establishments in Laxey today. The Festival of Brass Band, and that's from 2 till 4, and then that big brass blast-off at 4:15 at the village square. Also on the What's On guide, the MSPCA, I think it's still going ahead. There was maybe a bit of concern with the weather, but I'm sure I'll be told if it's not going ahead. The Manx SPCA are holding a TT Dog Walk Challenge. Each participant is to walk a mile of the TT course with their dog. It started at 7:30 this morning at the grandstand, and each mile taking about 20 minutes. So you can find out more by being at the grandstand or contacting the Manx SPCA. What else have we got on the What's On guide for you today? There's a vintage fashion show on at Union Mills Memorial Hall today. Also, a really good cause family fun day and car boot sale. That's happening at Onken Park today. That's from 10 a.m. it started, but it's on until 4 o'clock this afternoon at Onken Park in Onken, I should say. Also, there's the great Union Camera Obscura. Yes, pick your time of day today, I would say, to go down and look through it. That's open to the public today for the season. Also, the great festival we've mentioned. And the Brown Sugar are playing this evening. The band still going strong. They're playing their gig at the Manx Legion Club in Douglas this evening from round about 8 o'clock. And Phil, you've got one as well?
Yes, of course. Kathy Clucas and John Shakespeare were in on the programme 2 or 3 weeks back talking about Eve Alden. Eve Alden seems to have it seems to be stretching, because Culture Vannon started it off. Eve Alden, basically May Eve. Culture Vannon started off with thinking it might be the 30th of April, the day before May Day. We've got Eve Alden today, but of course those of us in the know that the real fairy magic only works on old May Eve, not the new modern fangled one. But anyway, that aside, Eve Alden celebration in Peel today. Loads going on. There's a whole load of music from 2 o'clock right the way through till I think about 9. You've got Clash Vua, Brie, May, Chalice, Bulgarian dance troupe, Scran, Scathern Jurg, Matt Kelly, Alice Dudley, Scathern Jurg, the Ballachs and Bisky Brisht. You'll find out what Eve Alden is all about with Kathy Clucas and Sue Woolley at various times throughout the day. A Manx language walking tour around Peel with Stewie Bennett. Games and challenges on the beach, and then it all kicks off at 8:45. Fire festival on the beach, fire music and celebration. So sounds like a great do down at Peel. Finishing off with fireworks over Peel Bay at 10 p.m.
That's a first. Going to be early for the weather update. 29 minutes past 11. Mist and low cloud will affect much of the island at first today, but gradually this will thin and break to allow sunny spells to develop. Where the sun comes out, it will be warm as temperatures rise to 16 or 17 today with very light winds. Tonight, most places will turn misty again, and then tomorrow warm sunny spells should gradually develop again as the mist becomes increasingly patchy. Maximum temperature for your bank holiday Monday, 17 Celsius.
We're looking out the window. We've got the Giall na Grianach as Chirim in the inner part of Douglas Bay, and then outer Douglas Bay it's still the Grosh Gromach as Gruid. So Chirim son and Hood Smoo leis Giachan Fes Giall na Grianach the Menach on Shia as Tui and Elian Richt. Och Grosh Gromach Gruid as Moor Genus onsen Shia as Jas son and Hood Smoo. Tempralis Giriga Shea na Shaak Celsius Sulvain Gruid. Brouwers Chirim Jedoonee les Shallan Bla Grianach Chit Rish, ag fós bíon gromach fegat ons bol na gas a vora elie. Tempralis Giriga Shaak na Hawk Celsius a Sulvai Sliston Mara na Gee. Hig began na Lia Mora Jamurt Shallan Grianach Sanyasta.
28 before 12 o'clock. It's Moghrey Jedoonee here on Manx Radio with my guests Phil Gawne and Annie Kissack as well. And we're talking in this part of the programme about Moana Douglas and particularly the poetry side of things. And what inspires you? Is it an equal amount of the arranging music and songs or poetry?
I think they're probably the same thing when it comes down to it. Songs, poems, words, sounds, they're all connected up. I enjoy reading poetry myself, and I suppose in...
Any poetry or just Manx?
Any poetry, yes. Well, not all poetry, of course. Yes, I have my stand. I enjoy Manx poetry too. I like the obviously the T. Brown and the dialect poetry and the tradition of that. I like listening to that, and I was lucky enough really. I heard earlier Dorothy Leese on the archive programme there, and I have been due to Moana Douglas, I have to say I've been on the stage with Dorothy Leese in assorted Manx dialect plays with my friend Claire Kilgallenstone that was, and my sister. We were often roped in to be the young person in a dialect play, but in terms of poetry, I suppose I didn't really realise that Moana Douglas was such a good poet until fairly recently. She kept that side of herself quite quiet, so I was pleased to start reading some things I enjoyed very much. Very simple verse on the face of it, but saying a lot about the island and her relationship with it. I've started doing bits of poetry myself, but it's not like Mona's stuff at all, because everybody speaks with their own voice for their own time and their own relationship with things. There's a lot of poetry generally going on the island at the moment, not necessarily focused about the island, sometimes just people with their own issues to talk about, and sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's challenging, but it's certainly a growing interest on the island. Yes,
I think that you get songs in the world and people do cover versions of them, and I always think people can sing other people's songs, but I think it's fairly difficult. I used to love poetry at school myself, and I used to write bits and down, and I love reading a good poem, and there's so many different types. Some of them are difficult to follow, the ones that have no rhyme in them at all until you get into them. But I think it's difficult to read somebody else's poems sometimes, isn't it?
It is. And of course the great thing about poetry is saying in as few words as possible something that means a huge amount to people. And that's what I like about poems. I was fortunate enough a few weeks ago to be asked to judge the primary kids' classes at the the Manx Folk Awards. They created some dialect poems, and it's fantastic to hear. And again, it's very easy to write a lot to try and express meaning and feeling for certain things, but the hard thing and the really good poems are the ones that manage, using very, very few words, to be able to put across some really important concepts and ideas to people.
And I know that I read some T.E. Brown sometimes, and the pleasure and privilege of working with John Kennick for I think 12 years on Countryside.
Yeah.
And, John could put something forward that was serious or something that was light-hearted, and he used to do the programme here where he'd read the part of Dear Countrymen from the Manx, and I've tried reading that and recording it, doing it myself, and I think, don't bother, Clarke. We're never going to read it like John did.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And there are people that almost own certain poems, aren't they? And you just know that no matter how hard you try, you're never going to be able to get it as good as they've sort of recorded it or done it in the past.
Right, time for the second of our Manx tracks this morning. And Annie, while we're on the subject of Moana Douglas, tell us a little bit about this CD that you brought in with you.
Yes, this is a recent CD. Well, it's a CD and a DVD, actually, but obviously that's
That's going to be a lot of use.
However, this was produced by Dave McLean of Peel. The material was taken from a concert that he organised 3 or 4 years ago now, but it's taken a while to get everything together. And basically, it was a celebration of the life of Moana Douglas. Got to get a random number of Manx musicians, and we had a few sessions at his house and just tried to come up with some new versions or imaginative versions of parts of Mona's life, some of the songs that she taught us, but putting them together in a completely different way. So the first track here was put together from an idea of the Manx spinning wheel song, that the thread it was put together by Alan Clegg, and it's called Snai, and it's about the delicate thread that ties us to the past, which is very much of a sort of Moana Douglas sort of thing. So it's in Manx, it's in English, and I think there's even a few native speakers dropped in again. Whether they knew they were in it or not, I doubt. But anyway, quite a modern piece of music, an imaginative interpretation of how we, I suppose, we reimagine, we connect with the past, but move into our own era. So this is Aileen Clegg, my contemporary from the Bunskull Gilgach, who write lots of songs together with her too, but this is her own version.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt the end there. A bit of Al Manx dialect on the end of it.
That was Manx language, actually.
Yeah.
Yes, those were the voices there were voices from the native speakers speaking Manx, and used, I suppose, to show that thread that ties us to the past there.
Mm.
And Phil, you've got a song there in Manx.
Yes, there's a song. I think Annie will do that. But just while she's just reading up on it, we were down at Cheshire Gilgach for the AGM last. When was it? Last? Oh, it was Friday night, wasn't it? And it was great to get down there. But on the wall, there's some boards that we had an exhibition of the native speakers at the Manx Museum. Gosh, must have been 20 years ago. Well, one of those boards has found its way down to Tyna Gilga. And Sage Convig, one of the native speakers that had been recorded, there's a big piece on her on the wall. And what was she saying? She was saying something like 100 weight of spuds in those days was worth 300 weight now. So she was saying that there was something about the way the spuds were grown. They were much more earthy and real when she was growing up than they were these later times. And she said, what more would a fellow want than a pot of spuds and a quarter of a pound of butter in it? For that's good feeding, she was saying. So marvellous stuff.
Yes, that engaged us in discussion all the way back.
It did.
No heron or sket.
Well, there would probably be a bit of that, but the spuds was the main thing.
Yeah,
No, it's great. There's some fantastic stuff from the native speakers when you get a chance to listen to it. But anyway, Annie, you're going to tell us about Tavig and Jerga.
All right, well, this sort of combines a few things we've been mentioning this morning. Starting off with E-Bolgen. Yeah, there's a traditional song called Tavig and Jerga, Red Top Knots, which was associated with May Day on the island. It's one of the oldest ones that we have collected, I think back from the 1820s. And it was the first song that I learnt when I went to Eglach and Moana Douglas made you sing songs straight away, and she put you in the guild. And I think I was put in the guild. I don't think I did particularly well with this, but I did Tavig and Jerga. So it was a May Day song. So shall I read it? Okay. Yo Tavig and Jerga as ribbon and green, ma vetsi veg villish, ma vesu liam peen. And then there's a bit of a chorus which just goes Robin-a-ree, quite a few times. And what on earth that means, Robin-a-ree, I don't entirely know. But anyway, it's you'll give you red top knots, that's those ribbons they would have had, and ribbons of green. My dear little Betsy, if you will be mine. And and then somebody else is trying to woo Betsy as well. Yo Tavig and Jerga as ribbon and ruby you ven rain of Olgen. Shen for the Olu. You will get red top knots and ribbons of black. You shall be the queen of the May. That I will swear. And then you've got this funny little chorus again. And then we've got oh Betsy veg villish na you brisha Moghrey. Tad grey the velu turet lesh Robin-a-ree. Oh, poor little Betsy, you're breaking my heart. They say you were courted by Robin-a-ree. Robin the King. Who was Robin-a-ree? Why they were doing it, don't know. Long time ago, but associated with May Day. So there you are, Tavig and Jerga, red top knots.
That's nice, isn't it? It's great to hear some of them words pronounced in the proper way.
And it's the sad thing, but possibly the intriguing thing about a lot of this is you get these little fragments of things, and you think there must have been a lot more to this at some time in the past. But of course, all we've got is the fragments that remain, and you've got to, you then have to have a vivid imagination, which fortunately Annie seems to have, to be able to then take these fragments and make them into something more exciting and interesting.
There you are, Ailen's song, The Delicate Thread. That's what it's all about, these threads of things coming together.
Well, it's been fascinating having you on the programme this morning, and I'm sure that we'll get you back to return to Moghrey Jedoonee in the near future as well, and to hear about your involvement with the Manx music, particularly Caird and Cúideach, and still going strong, and of course your Manx dialects and your poetry as well. And it's great to hear from such a young age and working and learning from Moana Douglas as well, who seemed to be well respected in that world.
Yes. Well, good night.
And next week, Phil?
Yeah, Ruth Kegan. Actually, we had a virtual Ruth Kegan on a week or so ago, a few recordings that I did with her. But Ruth is actually going to join you live on the programme. But she'll have some recordings too, or we hope anyway. She's supposed to be performing this week on a cruise ship. So she's going to take some recordings of people on the cruise ship, which should be fed into the programme, technology willing. So that should be quite interesting.
We'll handle it. Guramayad, thank you very much indeed for being on Moghrey Jedoonee, as always. And don't forget, it's available on the Listen Again feature and the Manx Radio portal on the Manx Radio website as well, powered by Miller Chaps. So you can all find all that on from next week as well, if you've missed today's programme. Okay, we'll leave it there. As we say, Guramayad, and we'll see you on the programme very soon indeed.
Yindasach.
Go to my